I never thought standing in my own driveway at 3 in the morning during a blizzard would turn into the most satisfying moment of my professional life. But there I was, watching Karen Patterson demand access to my heated garage, while having absolutely no idea I had just purchased the rental property she lived in 2 weeks ago. The snow was coming down so hard I could barely see 10 feet in front of me. February in Denver, Colorado was brutal this year, and the Weather Service had issued warnings about this storm for days. Most sensible people were inside, bundled up, riding it out. But not Karen Patterson, president of the Riverside Meadows HOA. No, she was standing on my driveway in her designer snow boots and North Face jacket, pointing at my garage door like she owned the place. "I am invoking HOA Emergency Protocol Section 12.4, she shouted over the wind. During severe weather events, residents with heated garages must provide access to board members for the safety of the community. I stared at her, snowflakes catching in my beard. "That's not a real thing, Karen." "Excuse me, it absolutely is. I wrote that provision myself 3 years ago." "Now open this garage immediately, Walter, or I will fine you $500 per day until this storm passes." Walter Vaughn, that was me. 32 years old, owned a property investment company called Vaughn Holdings, and apparently the new landlord of the woman currently threatening me. The irony was so thick I could taste it through the frozen air. "Let me get this straight," I said, pulling my coat tighter. "You want me to open my heated garage, the one I pay to heat, so you can park your Mercedes in there during the storm? Not just park. I'll be staying in there." "My power is out." "Your power is out, so you want to sit in my garage. Your garage is heated and attached to your house. You can provide me access through the interior door. This is what community means, Walter. This is what being a good neighbor looks like." I had moved into Riverside Meadows 6 months ago, and in that time, Karen had fined me twice for leaving my trash bins out 4 hours past collection time. Once for having a package on my porch for more than 24 hours, and 3 times for parking my work truck on the street overnight. The woman was a menace with a clipboard and too much time on her hands, but here was the thing she didn't know. 2 weeks ago, my company had closed on a purchase of 4 rental properties in this neighborhood. One of them was 2847 Riverside Drive, a 3-bedroom ranch that had been rented to the same tenant for 5 years. The previous landlord had handled everything remotely, and the tenant had been so low maintenance that they had barely spoken. The sale had been conducted entirely through attorneys and title companies. I had not met the tenant yet. I had simply received the rental agreement, saw that it was paid up through the end of the lease in August, and added it to my portfolio. That tenant was Karen Patterson. I had found out 3 days ago when I was reviewing my properties and cross-referencing addresses. I had actually laughed out loud in my office when I realized. My property manager, David, had asked what was so funny, and I had shown him. He had laughed too. We had both agreed this was going to be interesting when Karen eventually found out. I just had not expected it to happen at 3 in the morning during a blizzard with her demanding access to my garage. "I'm not opening my garage, Karen. Go back home. I will report you to the board. I will fine you. I will make your life in this neighborhood absolutely miserable." "More miserable than you already do. That's impressive." Her face was turning red, which was quite a feat considering how cold it was. "You think you're clever, don't you? You think you can just flaunt the rules because you're some big shot with a truck and an attitude. I think I can refuse to let someone use my private property, yes. The HOA bylaws clearly state that during emergencies, residents must assist each other. This is an emergency. My house is freezing. I need somewhere warm to stay. Then go to a hotel. The roads are undrivable. Nothing is open. You are being deliberately obstinate, and I will not forget this. I was getting tired of standing in the snow. My toes were going numb despite my boots. Karen, I have offered you nothing but courtesy since I moved here, and you have done nothing but harass me with petty fines and complaints. I'm not giving you access to my garage. End of discussion. Good night. I turned to walk back toward my front door, but she grabbed my arm. Actually grabbed it. You will open that garage or I will have you removed from this neighborhood. I have connections. I have power. You have no idea who you're dealing with. I looked down at her hand on my coat, then back up at her face. Take your hand off me. Not until you open that garage. Karen, remove your hand or I'm calling the police. For what? I'm a board member enforcing HOA policy. For trespassing and assault. You're on my property uninvited and you're physically restraining me. She let go but didn't step back. You're making a huge mistake. When the board hears about this, when the other residents hear how you refuse to help during an emergency, you'll be a pariah. Nobody will talk to you. Nobody will help you. You'll be alone in this neighborhood. I'm pretty comfortable with that outcome. She stood there glaring at me, snow piling up on her shoulders. The wind was howling now and visibility was getting worse. Despite everything, I felt a small twinge of concern. Not for her really, but just basic human decency. Look, if your power is really out and you're that cold, I can call you an Uber to a hotel downtown. Some of them still have generators running. I'm not leaving my house unattended during a storm. What if pipes burst? What if someone breaks in? Then go back inside, light some candles and use blankets like people have done for thousands of years. My house is 43 degrees inside. That's uncomfortable but not dangerous. You'll survive. I demand you help me, and I'm declining. We're going in circles now. I'm going inside. This time when I turned away, she didn't grab me, but she did shout. You'll regret this, Walter Vaughn. I promise you that. I will make your life hell. Every single day you live in Riverside Meadows, I will find something wrong with your property. I will fine you into bankruptcy. I will turn every single person in this neighborhood against you. You have no idea the kind of enemy you just made. I stopped at my front door and looked back at her. She was standing in the middle of my driveway, snow swirling around her, looking like some kind of vengeful snow witch from a bad horror movie. Noted, I said, and went inside through the window. I watched her stomp back across the street to her house. Her porch light flickered, which confirmed the power situation. I actually did feel a bit bad. 43 degrees was pretty cold, but her attitude and sense of entitlement had killed any charitable instinct I might have had. I made myself some hot chocolate and went to bed. The next morning, I woke up to find my truck had been ticketed. There was a bright orange violation notice stuck to the windshield. Apparently, I had violated HOA policy by parking in my own driveway during a snow emergency. According to the notice, all vehicles needed to be in garages during snow events to allow for plowing. The fine was $200. I stood there in my driveway, coffee in hand, staring at this ticket that had been placed on my truck sometime between when Karen left at 3 in the morning and now, 8 in the morning. The woman was dedicated. I had to give her that. I took a photo of the ticket and texted it to David. She's escalating, I wrote. When are you going to tell her? He replied. Soon. Lease is up in August. Going to send the non-renewal notice in March per the contract requirements. That gives her 5 months to find a new place. You're evil, I love it. I was not evil. I was just done being harassed. The HOA had no authority to fine me $200 for parking in my own driveway. I owned the property. I paid the HOA dues. I had read the bylaws cover to cover, and nowhere did it say anything about parking restrictions during snow events except on the street, which made sense for plowing. My truck had been in my driveway on my property, not blocking anything. This was retaliation, pure and simple. I got in my truck and drove to my office. My company was based in a renovated warehouse in the Rhino district, and I shared the space with 3 other small businesses. It was a good setup, cheap rent, good location, and the coffee shop downstairs made excellent espresso. David was already there when I arrived, feet up on his desk, scrolling through property listings on his laptop. "Morning, sunshine. How was your night?" I told him about the garage incident. He laughed so hard he nearly fell out of his chair. "She demanded access to your garage." Like actually demanded it, cited some fake HOA emergency protocol. "That's beautiful. That's absolutely beautiful. Please tell me you recorded it." It was 3 in the morning during a blizzard. I wasn't thinking about my phone. Shame. That would have been great content. David ran our social media and marketing. He was always thinking about content. Anyway, she ticketed my truck this morning. $200 fine for parking in my own driveway. "Are you going to pay it?" "Absolutely not. I'm going to frame it." We spent the morning going over property reports and maintenance requests. We owned 43 properties across Denver and the surrounding suburbs, and there was always something that needed attention. A furnace in Aurora, a leaky roof in Lakewood, a tenant dispute in Capitol Hill. It was never boring. Around noon my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Is this Walter Vaughn?" A woman's voice, older, professional, speaking. "This is Margaret Chen. I'm the vice president of the Riverside Meadows HOA. I'm calling regarding a complaint filed against you by our president, Karen Patterson." "Here we go. What's the complaint, Miss?" "Patterson has reported that you refused to provide emergency assistance during last night's storm, and that you were verbally abusive and threatening toward her when she requested help." I leaned back in my chair. "That's an interesting interpretation of events. Can you provide your version?" I walked her through the whole thing. Karen showing up at 3 in the morning, demanding access to my heated garage, claiming it was HOA policy, grabbing my arm when I refused, threatening to fine me and turn the neighborhood against me. There was a long pause. "She grabbed you?" "Yes." "And you asked her to leave?" "Multiple times." Another pause. "Mr. Vaughn, I need to be honest with you. This doesn't sound like the first time Karen has overstepped. We've had complaints before about her interpretation of HOA policies. However, she is the president, and she has a lot of support from the board. So what happens now? I'm going to document this conversation. The complaint she filed requests that you be fined $500 for refusing emergency assistance and another $500 for verbal harassment. I'm not going to support either of those fines. However, I wanted to give you a heads up that she's going to push for them at the next board meeting." "When is that?" "Next Thursday at 7 at the community center. You're welcome to attend and present your side. I'll be there." "Good." "And Mr. Vaughn, for what it's worth, I'm sorry. Karen means well, but she sometimes forgets that being HOA president doesn't mean she owns the neighborhood." After we hung up, I sat there thinking. Next Thursday was 10 days away. The lease non-renewal letter needed to go out in March, which was about a week away. The timing was delicate. If I sent the letter before the board meeting, she would know I was her landlord and would likely accuse me of retaliation. If I waited until after, she might escalate her HOA harassment. David walked over. "What's up?" I explained the situation. He whistled. "Tricky. What are you going to do?" "I'm going to wait until after the board meeting. Let her make her case, defend myself, and then send the letter the next day." That way it's clear the non-renewal has nothing to do with the HOA dispute. Except it totally does. Except I'm not renewing because she's a problem tenant who harasses people and creates drama. That's a legitimate reason. Is it though? Has she actually violated her lease? That was a good question. I pulled up her file. The lease was standard, pretty boilerplate. No smoking, no illegal activity, no damage to property, pay rent on time, be a good neighbor. Karen paid her rent like clockwork, never late. The property manager had done inspections yearly and reported no issues. On paper, she was a model tenant. Legally, I don't need a reason to non-renew, I said. The lease expires in August. I just have to give 5 months' notice per Colorado law, which March 1st accomplishes. She's going to lose her mind, probably. The next week was relatively quiet. I didn't get any more HOA tickets and Karen didn't show up at my house again. The storm had passed, the snow had been plowed, and life in Riverside Meadows returned to normal. I kept my head down, went to work, came home, and tried not to think about the upcoming board meeting. But on Wednesday, the day before the meeting, I came home to find a notice taped to my front door. It was from the HOA, and it informed me that my property was in violation of landscaping standards. Apparently my bushes were overgrown and needed trimming. My grass was visible in patches through the snow and appeared to be over the maximum height of 3 inches, and my mailbox post was chipped and needed repainting. The fine was $450, due within 30 days. I looked around my yard. The bushes were fine, trimmed in the fall just like everyone else's. The grass was dormant and covered in snow, and there was no way to determine its height. The mailbox post had one tiny chip near the bottom that you could only see if you crouched down and looked for it. This was absurd. I took photos of everything, documenting that my property was in perfectly acceptable condition, then went inside and called Margaret Chen. "Hi, Margaret, it's Walter Vaughn. I just got another violation notice from the HOA. Let me guess. Karen, how did you know?" She sighed. Because she filed 6 violation notices today, all against properties owned by people who have crossed her in some way. I'm guessing she's building a case against you for tomorrow's meeting. This is harassment, I agree, and I'm bringing it up at the meeting. But Walter, I need you to understand something. Karen has been president for 6 years. She has allies on the board. 3 of the 7 members vote with her on everything. I have 2 who usually vote with me. That leaves 1 swing vote, and he tends to avoid conflict. So you're saying she might actually get these fines approved? I'm saying it's possible. But having you there to defend yourself will help. People respond to seeing the actual person affected, not just reading about it in a report. The next evening, I drove to the Riverside Meadows Community Center, a small brick building near the neighborhood entrance. The parking lot was surprisingly full. Apparently, HOA meetings were well attended in this neighborhood, which probably explained how Karen had maintained power for so long. She had an audience. Inside, about 30 people were seated in rows of folding chairs facing a long table at the front where 7 board members sat. Karen was in the center, naturally, with Margaret to her right and 5 other people I didn't recognize. I found a seat near the back and waited. Karen called the meeting to order at exactly 7. She went through standard business, approving minutes from the last meeting, discussing the budget, reviewing maintenance schedules for common areas. It was all very official and boring. Then she got to new business. Item 7 on the agenda: violation complaints and fines. We have several properties in violation of HOA standards that need to be addressed. She pulled out a folder and started reading. 2847 Riverside Drive. Tenant has failed to maintain landscaping standards. Recommended fine, $450. Wait, she had just read her own address. She was fining herself. No, wait. She thought the landlord was the previous owner. She didn't know I had bought the property. This was getting better by the minute. 3421 Riverside Drive, parking violations during snow emergency. Recommended fine, $200. That was me. 3421 Riverside Drive, failure to provide emergency assistance. Recommended fine, $500. Also me. 3421 Riverside Drive, verbal harassment of board member. Recommended fine, $500. Me again. She went through 3 other properties with various minor complaints, then looked up. Discussion. Margaret spoke up. Karen, I have concerns about the complaints against 3421 Riverside Drive. I spoke with Mr. Vaughn, who is here tonight, and his version of events differs significantly from yours. I think we need to hear from him. Karen's eyes scanned the room and landed on me. Her expression hardened. Mr. Vaughn is welcome to speak during the public comment period. This directly affects him. I think we should hear from him now. One of the other board members, a man in his 60s, nodded. I agree. Mr. Vaughn, would you like to address the board? I stood up and walked to the front. All eyes were on me. Karen looked like she wanted to set me on fire with her mind. Thank you. I'll keep this brief. On the night of the storm, at approximately 3 in the morning, Miss Patterson came to my property and demanded that I open my heated garage and allow her to use it because her power was out. She claimed this was required under HOA emergency protocol. I declined. She became aggressive, threatened to fine me and turn the neighborhood against me, and physically grabbed my arm when I attempted to go back inside my house. I asked her to leave multiple times. At no point was I verbally abusive or harassing. I simply exercised my right to refuse access to my private property. Murmurs rippled through the audience. That's a lie, Karen said immediately. You were hostile from the moment I arrived. You refused to help a neighbor in need during a dangerous storm. You threatened to call the police on me for simply asking for assistance. I threatened to call the police after you grabbed me and refused to let go. I never touched you. You did. And you know you did. Margaret held up a hand. Okay, we have 2 different versions of events. Let's move to the other violations. The parking violation. My truck was in my driveway on my property, not blocking any street or common area. There is no HOA policy prohibiting parking in your own driveway during snow events. Karen shuffled papers. Section 8.2 of the bylaws states that during snow events, all vehicles must be garaged to allow for efficient plowing of streets and driveways. We don't have shared driveways. The HOA doesn't plow individual driveways. That's on homeowners. More murmurs. A woman in the front row actually nodded. Margaret looked at Karen. Is that true? We don't plow driveways. The spirit of the rule is about keeping the neighborhood accessible during emergencies. But we don't plow driveways, Margaret pressed. So his truck being in his own driveway had no impact on plowing operations. Karen's jaw tightened. The rule exists for a reason that doesn't apply in this situation. The older man who had asked me to speak cleared his throat. What about the landscaping violations at 2847? I bit back a grin. I actually can't speak to that one. That's not my property. Then let's table it for now, he said. Margaret, can you follow up with the homeowner? I'll contact them, Margaret said, not quite hiding her smile. She knew. She had put 2 and 2 together. Karen was visibly frustrated now. Fine. Let's vote on the violations against 3421 Riverside Drive. All in favor of the parking fine. 3 hands went up. Karen and 2 others. Opposed, 4 hands, including Margaret and the older man. Motion fails. Emergency assistance fine. Same split. 3 to 4. Motion fails. Harassment fine. Again, 3-4. Karen looked furious. Unbelievable. This man refused to help during an emergency and you're letting him off with no consequences. Because he didn't violate any actual rules, Margaret said calmly. You can't fine people for not doing things they were never required to do. I'm the president of this board and I'm telling you he should be fined. And 4 of us disagree. That's how voting works. The meeting continued for another 20 minutes, covering boring topics like pool opening schedules and mailbox maintenance. I stayed until the end, then waited outside for Margaret. She came out about 10 minutes later, looking tired. Thank you for backing me up in there, I said. I didn't do it for you. I did it because Karen is out of control and someone needs to rein her in. This isn't the first time she's abused her authority, but it's getting worse. Why do people keep voting for her? Because she's very good at convincing people she's protecting property values and maintaining standards. And to be fair, she does care about the neighborhood. She just has no sense of boundaries or proportionality. Well, I appreciate it anyway. She studied me for a moment. You bought 2847, didn't you? How did you know? Because when I looked up the property records to contact the owner about the violation, the deed showed Vaughn holdings as of 2 weeks ago, and Karen lives at 2847. I nodded. I close on properties all the time. Didn't realize she was the tenant until after the fact. Are you going to renew her lease? No. Because of this HOA situation. Because she's a problem tenant who harasses people. That's a legitimate business reason. Margaret smiled. When are you telling her? Tomorrow. I'm sending the non-renewal notice certified mail. She'll get it by early next week. Oh, this is going to be spectacular. I almost feel bad for her. Almost. Do you think she'll escalate? Definitely. But legally, there's not much she can do. You're well within your rights as a landlord. Just document everything. I drove home feeling satisfied. The board meeting had gone better than expected. Karen had failed to get her fines approved, had been publicly called out for overreach, and was about to get a very unpleasant surprise in the mail. The next morning, Friday, I drafted the lease non-renewal letter. It was professional and straightforward, informing Karen Patterson that her lease at 2847 Riverside Drive would not be renewed upon expiration on August 31st, and that she needed to vacate the property by that date. Per Colorado law, I was providing 5 full months' notice. The letter thanked her for being a tenant and wished her well in finding new housing. I printed it, signed it, sealed it in an envelope, and took it to the post office for certified mail with signature confirmation. Important document. The postal clerk asked. You could say that. The weekend passed quietly. I caught up on maintenance issues at other properties, reviewed financial reports, and tried not to obsess about Karen's inevitable reaction to the letter. On Monday afternoon, my phone rang. Certified mail had been delivered and signed for. Karen had the letter. 3 hours later, my phone rang again. This time it was a number I recognized from my property management files. Karen's number. I let it go to voicemail. The voicemail was 2 minutes of her shouting about illegal retaliation, discrimination, and lawsuits. She demanded I call her back immediately. I didn't. Instead, I forwarded the voicemail to my real estate attorney, a sharp woman named Patricia Mendez who specialized in landlord-tenant law. Thoughts? I texted. She's panicking. Don't engage. Let her calm down. If she wants to discuss, tell her all communication needs to go through me. 20 minutes later, Karen called again. I didn't answer. Another voicemail, this time threatening to sue for wrongful eviction. Patricia texted, It's not an eviction, it's a non-renewal, completely different and completely legal. She's grasping. On Tuesday, I got a letter from a law firm. Karen had retained an attorney. The letter claimed that my non-renewal was retaliatory, discriminatory based on her age and gender, and violated Colorado housing law. It demanded I rescind the notice and offer a lease renewal on the same terms. I forwarded it to Patricia. "Let me handle this," she said when she called. "Her attorney is fishing. They have no case. You're a landlord exercising your legal right to non-renew. You gave proper notice. She's paid up and hasn't violated the lease. There's no discrimination. Age and gender aren't factors when you didn't renew. The HOA stuff is irrelevant because that's a separate issue. So what do? I'll respond, explain the law, and tell them we're not budging. If they want to sue, they can sue, but they'll lose." Wednesday morning, I was in my office when David rushed in. "Dude, you need to see this." He showed me his phone. Someone had posted in the Riverside Meadows community Facebook group. It was Karen, and she had written a long screed about how I was illegally evicting her in retaliation for her enforcing HOA rules, and that I was a corrupt landlord who harassed tenants. She encouraged everyone to support her and stand up against landlords who abuse their power. The post had 70 comments already, and it had only been up for an hour. Should I respond? I asked. Absolutely not. Let her hang herself. I scrolled through the comments. To my surprise, they weren't all supportive of Karen. In fact, a lot of people were calling her out. "Karen, you're the HOA president. You harass people constantly. Maybe this is karma." "Wait, you're being evicted. Does this mean we get a new HOA president?" "I've lived here 10 years and you've fined me 8 times for stupid stuff. I'm not feeling sympathetic. This guy refused to let you use his garage, and now you're shocked he doesn't want to be your landlord. Girl, raid the room." There were supporters too, people who thought landlords were inherently evil and that I must be in the wrong. But the overall tone was not as pro-Karen as she probably expected. Then Margaret Chen posted, "Karen, I don't think airing this on social media is wise. And calling it an eviction is inaccurate. Your lease is expiring and he's choosing not to renew. That's his legal right." Karen responded, "Of course you defend him. You've been trying to undermine me for months." Margaret, "I've been trying to keep you from abusing your authority." There's a difference. It devolved from there, with neighbors taking sides and arguing about HOA politics, landlord rights, and Karen's general behavior over the years. It was messy and public and exactly what I didn't want. I called Patricia. "Karen's going public on social media. Should I be worried? Only if she says something defamatory. Are you monitoring it?" "Yes. Screenshot everything, especially if she makes false claims. If she accuses you of anything illegal or unethical, we might have a libel case." Over the next few days, Karen's online campaign intensified. She posted in multiple neighborhood groups, local housing advocacy forums, and even tried to get local news interested in the story. Most ignored her, but one small community blogger reached out to me for comment. "Thanks for contacting me," I said. "I can't comment on ongoing landlord-tenant matters, but I can tell you that I'm following all Colorado housing laws and have provided proper notice per legal requirements. Miss Patterson is welcome to pursue legal remedies if she believes otherwise." The blogger published a balanced piece that included Karen's claims and my statement, along with an interview with a housing attorney, not connected to the case, who explained that landlords had broad discretion in non-renewals as long as they provided proper notice and didn't discriminate against protected classes. Karen was apoplectic. She posted that the media was biased against tenants and that I had clearly paid off the blogger and the attorney. Then things took a turn. On Friday, exactly 1 week after Karen received the non-renewal letter, I got a call from the Denver Police Department. "Is this Walter Vaughn?" My stomach dropped. "Yes." This is Officer Martinez with DPD. We received a report that you've been harassing and threatening a tenant. Can you come down to the station to answer some questions? Karen Patterson filed a report. I can't confirm the identity of the complainant, but we do need to speak with you. I called Patricia immediately. She agreed to meet me at the station. 2 hours later, I was sitting in an interview room with Patricia beside me and Officer Martinez across the table. He was young, professional, and didn't seem particularly interested in being there. Mr. Vaughn, thanks for coming in. I want to be clear, you're not under arrest or being charged with anything. We just need to follow up on a complaint. I understand. The complaint alleges that you've been sending threatening letters, making harassing phone calls, and stalking the complainant at her residence. Patricia spoke up. Officer, my client has sent exactly one letter to Miss Patterson, a legally required lease non-renewal notice. He has not called her at all. In fact, she has called him repeatedly, and he has declined to answer. And he has not been to her residence except to his own home directly across the street, where he's lived for 6 months. Can you provide evidence of this? I showed him the certified mail receipt, the call logs on my phone showing Karen's incoming calls and no outgoing ones, and the timeline of events. Officer Martinez reviewed everything. So she lives across the street from you? Yes. I didn't know she was my tenant when I bought the property. And the non-renewal is because of what? Patricia answered. My client is exercising his legal right as a landlord to choose not to renew a lease. He doesn't need a reason, but for the record, Miss Patterson has been harassing him in her capacity as HOA president, and he prefers not to maintain a landlord-tenant relationship with someone who creates ongoing conflict. Officer Martinez nodded. Okay, this seems pretty straightforward. Mr. Vaughn, I'm going to close this report as unfounded. For what it's worth, I've dealt with Miss Patterson before. She filed a report last year against a neighbor for theft because their dog pooped in her yard. We explained that's not theft, that's just having a dog. She insisted we investigate. Despite the stress, I almost laughed. However, he continued, I'm going to document this interaction. If she continues to file false reports, we can potentially charge her with misuse of emergency services. But I'd recommend you avoid any direct contact with her from now on. Trust me, that's the plan. Leaving the police station, Patricia turned to me. She's escalating. Filing a false police report is serious. Will she get in trouble? Depends. If she does it again, maybe. But one report that gets closed as unfounded usually just gets noted. The problem is she's becoming unpredictable. What should I do? Document everything. Don't engage with her. Let me handle all communication. And honestly, consider getting a camera for your front door. If she's willing to lie to the police, she might try other things. I took her advice. That weekend, I installed a Ring doorbell and 2 additional security cameras covering my driveway and front yard. If Karen came onto my property again, I'd have video. The next week was quiet. Too quiet. No calls, no letters, no police reports. Karen had gone silent on social media too. It made me nervous. Then on Thursday, I came home from work to find my truck had a flat tire. Not just low, completely flat with a visible slash in the sidewall. I checked my cameras. The footage from 3 that afternoon showed a person in a dark hoodie and sunglasses walking up my driveway, crouching by my tire for about 30 seconds, then walking away. The person was too covered up to identify clearly, but the build and walk looked female. And the person had come from the direction of Karen's house. I called the police and filed a report. Officer Martinez came out, looked at the tire and the footage and shook his head. You can't see a face, can't prove who it is, but you can see someone intentionally slashed my tire. I can see someone near your tire and your tire is slashed. For criminal mischief charges, we'd need clearer identification, but I'll write it up. And I'll note this is the second report involving you and Miss Patterson. That pattern matters if things continue." He was right, but I was frustrated. My tire was slashed. I had it on video, and there was nothing to be done except file an insurance claim and replace the tire. 2 days later, someone spray-painted "corrupt landlord" on my mailbox. Again, caught on camera, again with the person too covered up to identify. Another police report. Then my trash cans got knocked over in the middle of the night. More camera footage, same unidentifiable person. Another report. Patricia advised me to start documenting everything in a harassment log, with dates, times, descriptions, and police report numbers. If this continues, we can pursue a restraining order. Based on what? We can't prove it's her. The pattern, the timing, the motive. Judges aren't stupid. If someone is systematically harassing you right after you decline to renew their lease, and all the harassment started after that notice, a judge can connect the dots. In early March, the harassment stopped. I didn't know if it was because Karen realized she was making things worse for herself, or if she was planning something else. Either way, I was grateful for the peace. I focused on work, managed my properties, and tried to forget about Karen Patterson. Then April arrived, and with it, the next HOA board meeting. I wasn't planning to attend, but Margaret called me. "You should come. Karen is trying to pass new bylaws that basically target you specifically." "What kind of bylaws?" "Restrictions on investment property owners. Limits on how many properties one person can own in the neighborhood. Requirements for landlords to justify non-renewals to the HOA board. It's absurd and probably unenforceable, but she's pushing hard." I went to the meeting. The room was packed again, even more than last time. Apparently word had spread about the drama between me and Karen. When Karen presented her proposed bylaw changes, the room erupted. Landlords in the neighborhood were furious. Renters were confused about why this mattered. Margaret and her allies on the board argued that the HOA had no authority to regulate landlord-tenant relationships beyond basic property maintenance. "This is government overreach at the most local level," one homeowner shouted. "You can't tell people what to do with their private property." "I'm trying to protect our community from predatory landlords," Karen shot back. "Walter isn't predatory. He's declining to renew one lease because you've been harassing him." It went back and forth for over an hour. Finally, Margaret called for a vote. The proposed bylaw changes failed 4-3, same split as before. Karen was visibly shaking with rage. "This board is corrupt. You're all protecting him because he has money and connections." "We're protecting property rights," Margaret said calmly, "which is literally our job as a board." After the meeting, several neighbors approached me to apologize for Karen's behavior and express support. One older gentleman shook my hand and said, "I've lived here 20 years. She's the worst HOA president we've ever had. Thank you for standing up to her." It felt good to have support, but I also knew Karen wasn't done. In May, I got a letter from the city zoning department. Someone had filed a complaint that I was operating an illegal business out of my home. The city sent an inspector. The inspector showed up, looked around, found nothing except a home office with a computer and some files, and closed the complaint as unfounded. "You know who filed the complaint?" I asked. "Anonymous. But I've been doing this 20 years. Neighbors fighting neighbors, we see it all the time. Just document this in case there are more complaints." More complaints came. The health department got a report of unsanitary conditions at my house. Unfounded. The fire department got a report of illegal storage of hazardous materials. Unfounded. Code enforcement got a report that I had built an unpermitted structure. Unfounded. Every complaint was investigated. Every complaint was closed. Every complaint wasted hours of my time dealing with inspectors and explaining that I was being harassed. By June, I had filed for a restraining order. Patricia had compiled all the documentation, the police reports, the false complaints to city departments, the camera footage, the harassment log, the timeline showing everything started after the non-renewal notice. It was a thick file. The hearing was scheduled for June 20th. Karen showed up with her attorney, the same one who had sent the initial threatening letter. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s named Judge Reeves, reviewed the evidence. "Miss Patterson, did you file these complaints with the city?" I exercised my right as a citizen to report potential violations. "Did you have any actual evidence of violations?" I had concerns. Multiple concerns that all turned out to be unfounded. And these concerns only started after Mr. Vaughn declined to renew your lease. Is that correct? The timing is coincidental. Is it? Because it looks like a systematic campaign of harassment to me. Karen's attorney spoke up. "Your Honor, my client maintains that she was acting in good faith as both a private citizen and as HOA president to ensure community standards were maintained. By filing false reports, by spray painting his mailbox, by slashing his tire. There's no evidence my client did those things." Judge Reeves looked at the camera footage. "There's video of someone matching your client's build doing these things, and the timing, again, is remarkably specific." She granted the restraining order. Karen was prohibited from coming within 100 feet of me or my property, from contacting me directly or indirectly, and from filing any further complaints about me without legitimate documented evidence of violations. "Miss Patterson, I'm going to be very clear. If you violate this order, you will be arrested. If you file one more false complaint, I will hold you in contempt. Mr. Vaughn has been more than patient. This ends today." Walking out of the courthouse, I felt lighter than I had in months. It was almost over. 2 more months and Karen would be out of the rental house. The restraining order meant she couldn't harass me anymore. I could finally move on. But Karen had one more move to make. In July, 3 weeks before her lease ended, I got a call from my property manager. "We have a problem at 2847. "What kind of problem?" Karen's trashed the place. "I did a pre-move-out inspection like usual, and there's damage everywhere. Holes in walls, carpet destroyed, appliances damaged. She's clearly done it intentionally." I drove over immediately. The property manager let me in, and I stood in the living room staring at the destruction. She hadn't just moved out carelessly. She had actively destroyed things. There were fist-sized holes in the drywall. The carpet had what looked like bleach stains in multiple rooms. The refrigerator door was hanging off its hinges. The bathroom sink was cracked. "How much to repair?" I asked. Conservatively, $8,000, maybe more depending on what else we find. I took photos of everything, documenting each instance of damage. This wasn't normal wear and tear. This was vandalism. This was her security deposit and then some. I called Patricia. She destroyed the rental property. Document everything. Get estimates. File a civil suit for damages beyond the security deposit. And honestly, at this point, with the restraining order violations if she's been near the property, maybe criminal charges too. I called Officer Martinez. He came out, looked at the damage, and agreed it warranted investigation. This is malicious mischief, which can be a criminal offense. Given the value of the damage, it could be a felony. I'll need to interview Miss Patterson. 3 days later, Karen was arrested. Turned out the property damage combined with violating the restraining order, by continuing to file false complaints with the city, which I found out about when a confused building inspector called me directly to say he thought something was wrong because this was the 8th complaint against my address in 3 months, was enough for criminal charges. Karen was charged with felony criminal mischief and misdemeanor violation of a restraining order. She posted bail and immediately hired a criminal defense attorney. The neighborhood Facebook groups exploded. People were shocked that their HOA president had been arrested. Margaret called an emergency board meeting, and Karen was voted out as president, 5-2. She tried to argue she should remain in her position, but the board bylaws were clear. Criminal charges involving dishonesty or property damage were grounds for immediate removal. Margaret became the new president. One of her first acts was to rescind every fine Karen had issued in the past year and refund the money to residents who had paid. Karen's trial was scheduled for September. In the meantime, she moved out of the rental property on August 31st as required. I kept her entire security deposit and filed a civil suit for the remaining damages. My insurance covered most of the repair costs, but I wanted a judgment on record. The trial was quick. The prosecution presented the photos, the estimates, the timeline of harassment, the restraining order, and the continued violations. Karen's defense was that she had been targeted by a corrupt landlord and was simply defending herself. The jury didn't buy it. She was convicted on both counts. The judge sentenced her to 1-year probation, 200 hours of community service, and ordered her to pay full restitution for the property damage, which totaled $9,200 after all repairs were complete. Standing in that courtroom, watching Karen's face as the verdict was read, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired. This whole situation had consumed 8 months of my life. It had been stressful, expensive, and exhausting, but it was over. After the sentencing, Patricia and I walked out of the courthouse together. "You did everything right," she said. "You documented, you stayed professional, you didn't retaliate or escalate. Karen did this to herself. I just wanted to not renew a lease, and you had every right to. She turned it into a war." I went home that evening, sat in my living room, and looked out the window at 2847 Riverside Drive across the street. The house was empty now. I had decided not to re-rent it immediately. Maybe I'd sell it, maybe I'd renovate it first, maybe I'd just sit on it for a while. I had time to decide. My phone buzzed. It was Margaret. "Hey, wanted to let you know the new board voted tonight. We're reviewing all of Karen's policies and bylaws to see what needs to be changed or removed. And we're implementing new rules about how violations can be issued and appealed. Should have done this years ago. That's great news. Also, several people suggested we should ask if you want to join the board. We have an open seat," I laughed. "Absolutely not. I've had enough HOA drama for a lifetime. Fair enough, but thank you for standing up to her. For not backing down. A lot of people were afraid of her, and you showed everyone she wasn't untouchable." After we hung up, I made myself dinner and settled in to watch a movie. For the first time in months, I felt relaxed in my own home. The next morning, Saturday, I woke up to my doorbell ringing. I checked the Ring camera before answering. It was a young couple, maybe late 20s, looking nervous. I opened the door. "Can I help you?" "Hi, we're sorry to bother you. We're looking at houses in the neighborhood and someone mentioned you own rental properties here. Is 2847 going to be available?" I looked across the street at the empty house. "It might be." "Why?" "We love this neighborhood. We've been trying to find a place to rent here for months. And honestly, we heard about the whole situation with the previous tenant and the HOA president, and we just wanted to say we think you handled it really professionally. We'd love to rent from someone who actually follows the law and treats people fairly." I smiled. Come back tomorrow afternoon. I'll show you the place. They did come back and they loved the house. I checked their references, reviewed their financial information, and they were solid. Good jobs, good credit, no drama. I offered them a lease starting October 1st. They moved in 3 weeks later, and they've been model tenants. They pay on time, they take care of the property, and they're pleasant neighbors. Everything Karen should have been but wasn't. As for Karen, I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she moved to Aurora and bought a condo in a community with no HOA, probably for the best. The restraining order expired after 2 years, but she never contacted me again. I kept an eye on my properties and my credit for a while, paranoid she might try something else, but nothing ever happened. Life in Riverside Meadows settled into a comfortable routine. Margaret turned out to be an excellent HOA president, focused on maintaining the neighborhood without being a tyrant about it. The community felt friendlier, more relaxed. People stopped being afraid of getting ridiculous fines for minor infractions. And me. I learned an important lesson about tenant screening. I always checked HOA involvement now. If someone was on an HOA board, I thought twice about renting to them. Power dynamics got complicated when your tenant also had authority over your property through the HOA. It wasn't worth the headache. My company continued to grow. We acquired more properties, hired more staff, and built a reputation for being fair but firm landlords. The Karen situation, once the full story got out through the trial and local news coverage, actually helped. Other landlords reached out to ask for advice. Tenants reached out wanting to rent from someone who would stand up to harassment. It turned a nightmare into a strange kind of marketing. 3 years later, I sold 2847 Riverside Drive. The couple who had been renting it wanted to buy, and I gave them a fair price. They were good people, and I was happy to help them become homeowners. The day of the closing, as I handed over the keys and signed the final paperwork, the husband said, "You know, we tell people the story of how we got this house. About you standing up to that crazy HOA lady. It's become kind of legendary in the neighborhood. I didn't really do anything special. I just didn't let someone bully me. That's more than most people do. Thanks for renting to us. Thanks for being a good landlord. And thanks for showing everyone that HOA presidents aren't actually all-powerful." I drove home that day thinking about how strange life could be. A simple business decision, choosing not to renew a lease, had spiraled into months of harassment, property damage, criminal charges, and ultimately a complete change in how Riverside Meadows functioned as a community. But in the end, it had worked out. Karen faced consequences for her actions. The neighborhood improved. Good people found a home. And I learned that sometimes standing your ground, documenting everything, and refusing to be intimidated was the right move, even when it was difficult. I never did see Karen again after the trial. Sometimes I wondered if she learned anything from the experience, if she regretted her choices, if she had moved on to terrorize some other community, or if she had finally mellowed out. Mostly, though, I didn't think about her at all. I was too busy living my life, running my business, and being the kind of landlord I had always wanted to be. Fair, professional, and completely drama-free. Well, mostly drama-free. There was that incident 6 months later with a tenant who tried to run an illegal dog breeding operation, but that's a story for another time. For now, standing in my driveway on a sunny afternoon, looking at the quiet street where all this had started with a blizzard and an entitled HOA president demanding my garage, I felt at peace. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's just living well, doing things right, and letting karma handle the rest. And in Karen Patterson's case, karma had handled it perfectly.